All right, everybody's got food in them, so do I. Thank you. So very quick 1 minute on StrongUp. They're a very small company, a boutique company. We've been focusing on encryption and key management for the last 11 years. Lots and lots of PKIs for some of the smallest and some of the largest companies in the world. But we've gotten into symmetric key management about 5 years ago when everybody was trying to figure out how to comply with PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. So we have some products, but I'm not going to talk too much about this. Everything is on the website. Why are you here listening to me? This just establishes some of my background so that you understand where I'm coming from. I've been doing work in the crypto area for the last 12 years, and all our work is open source. The only thing I will mention is that the appliance, even though the software is open source, we distribute it only as part of an appliance. Because of the complexity of what we've created and the fact that it's tied to a hardware module, just makes it impossible for us to support this on the open internet. So we didn't even try that. We learned that from the StrongKey open source key management system that we put out 6 years ago, which is still out there. Still does a great job, still being downloaded all over the world. But given the complexity of setting that up, this was a simplification, but enough about me. Before I get into the architecture of regulatory compliant cloud computing, indulge me for 5 minutes, because every time I talk to people about cryptography and key management, people are all over the map in terms of their knowledge of cryptography. So for those who know all the things that I'm going to talk about, please bear with me for 5 minutes. For those to whom cryptography is new, I just want to introduce you to some of the terms and some of the concepts in 5 slides. I'm just going to talk about encryption, tokenization, hashing, and key management. These are the things that you see in the use of cryptography. So encryption comes in 2 forms. There's what's called symmetric and asymmetric encryption. With symmetric encryption, the characteristics are that you have a single key, what's called a symmetric key, and you use a particular algorithm for the encryption and the decryption using the same key. That's the important part. So if you started off with what's called plain text, unencrypted data, and used a particular key with the encryption, you would get what's called ciphertext. And you would have to use the same key and the reverse process to get back the original plain text. So that's symmetric encryption. The important characteristics are it is shared for encryption and decryption. It is significantly faster than the other kind of encryption. There is no limit to the size of plain text that you can encrypt. Movies, the entire Library of Congress, whatever. These are some of the more important algorithms and key sizes that have been out there. DES was one of the most important ones, but it's hopefully not being used. That's why it's in red, because it's completely broken. Triple DES is still useful, but more than likely, if you're building anything new today for protecting data in cryptography, you're using advanced encryption system and one of these 3 key sizes. So this is asymmetric. What's different about asymmetric? You have 2 parts to the key. There is a public part that is shareable with anyone in the world, and there is a private part that you keep very, very carefully and securely under tight control. If you're encrypting something, plain text, you would encrypt typically using the public key, and you get ciphertext. But when you decrypt, you have to use the private key to do the decryption. You cannot do a decryption with the public key. The reverse process is typically called digital signatures, where you are encrypting with a private key and decrypting with the public key. That's a digital signature. But we're not here to talk about digital signatures. We're here to talk about encryption. So some of the most important, algorithm is the Reverse Shamir algorithm, the inventors, the three inventors who created the RSA algorithm. Key sizes range anywhere from 512 all the way up to 8,192, but the minimum anyone should be using today is 2,048. It's a slower algorithm, and the amount of data that you can encrypt with the RSA algorithm is limited. So the industry over the last 15 years has standardized on a process where they typically use a symmetric key like a triple DES or an AES to encrypt files of any size, and then they use the RSA algorithm to encrypt the symmetric key and transfer the symmetric key from point A to point B. And on the other side, they use the private key to decrypt the symmetric key, and then they use the symmetric key to decrypt the encrypted file that can be of any size. The PGP algorithm works that way, SSH works that way, SSL works that way, IPsec works that way. So just about any implementation you see of cryptography today that does bulk encryption is always using a short symmetric key in there for the bulk encryption and the asymmetric encryption for the key encryption.
Arshad, you mentioned that 2048-bit key is what you
Size.
said you should be using for the asymmetric.
RSA.
So are you actually seeing a lot of people using that now? Because that's sort of relatively new.
Everything that Strawmouth has been implementing since 1999 has always been 2048-bit. But there are implementations with shorter key sizes out there. Only because...
What's the relationship to SHA-1 and SHA-2?
Thank you. That's my lead-in. So the third type of cryptographic operation we're going to talk about is a message digest, also called a hash. With a message digest, what you're doing is you're just using an algorithm. There is no key involved. But the interesting property is it's one way. You cannot go backwards. So the hash that you get at the end of the algorithm process cannot be reversed. At least computationally, it has been impossible to reverse that for as long as hashes have been around. If someone knows any secrets, then nobody is talking about it. There is no key involved, and there is no limit to the size of the data that you can hash. And the two of the most important algorithms so far have been the message digest 5, which is completely broken, and the SHA secure hashing algorithm. Now, SHA-1 is still considered secure, but NIST, which typically establishes standards for cryptographic algorithms for the federal government, but which are generally used by the private industry also, NIST has gone on record that the federal government should not be using SHA-1 starting January 1, 2011. So that was 11 months ago. They are required to use SHA-2 algorithms, which is 256-bit, 384, or 512. They have even announced a competition for SHA-3, the next revision of the digest algorithm, but that will take a few years before it's standardized. Anything new that's going into production today should hopefully be SHA-2. But that doesn't prevent some companies from still implementing SHA-1, because many of the applications that use digests, they don't necessarily work with SHA-2. Microsoft, for example, on Windows XP, I don't remember when Windows XP came out. Does anyone remember? Back in the 90s? 2000. They did not support SHA-2 until 2007, I think. Service Pack 3 was the first time that they actually supported SHA-2.
But 256 bits back in 2000 would have been a pretty beefy computer.
Oh yeah.
So, thanks, right?
I agree. Tokenization is being used quite a lot in the payment card industry data security standard, PCI DSS, for encrypting credit card numbers. There is no cryptography involved here, despite what most people say. It's very simple substitution in most cases. But the goal is to essentially not change applications and keep the token looking exactly like the original data. so that the application schema doesn't have to change, the